I'm going to be walking you through how I made my final project vest. First thing I did was I got this thrifted jacket and I cut off the sleeves. Next, I measured the jacket so I could make my patches. Here's a closer look of what it looks like before I did anything to it. Here's the back too. Now it's time to dye. The fabric, that is. I filled my sink with hot water and then was ready to add the dye. Carefully following the instructions, I dump the dye in. I don't want to make this jacket black, but I want it to be a dark wash. So given the weight of the jacket and the amount of dye, this should work in my favor. I was kind of mesmerized by how the dye looked. It just looked like a pool of oil or something. It was beautiful. And what's a good dye soup without some seasoning? I added in a cup of salt to help the dye stick to the fabric. I mean, maybe it's just me, but I just love looking at this. Look how beautiful that is. But anyway, I'm just mixing up the dye and the salt. Now for the moment of truth. Time to add the vest. Carefully. I was supposed to wear gloves, but I was like, it's fine. And then my hands were purple for 2 days. So if you're ever going to do this, please wear gloves. I later transferred the vest to a bucket to make sure it got more full coverage. Here's some proof of my purple zombie hands. On another note, I let the vest sit for about an hour. While it was sitting, I cut out my patches, and here they are. To make the patches, I simply drew out what I wanted in chalk and then filled it in with some white paint. After an hour had passed, it was time for me to check my vest. I used the paper towel test to see if I was happy with the color, and I was, so it was ready to finally take out. To be honest, I was really nervous. I took it out and rinsed it until the water ran clear. I threw the vest in the washing machine along with an old towel to wick off any excess dye. And don't worry, I cleaned the floor afterwards. Eventually, I also took her out of the dryer and was awaiting my results. And this is the jacket completely dry. This is a comparison of the sleeve, which I didn't dye, to the actual jacket. Painting anything, let alone patches, is always terrifying because look how bad that looks. But eventually, it turns out fine once you clean it up. For sewing on the patches, I chose an upholstery thread made out of 100% nylon instead of a regular polyester one. This gives the thread a lot more strength. I ended up changing the shape and size of some of the patches so that they would look better, but the process was exactly the same as before. And here's just a little comparison of the two threads while I struggle to get my camera to focus. A technique used in the earlier times of alternative subcultures were to use lighters for what you needed. So instead of knotting off some thread, you would just melt or burn it. So in my case with the nylon thread, it melted so I didn't have to tie off the ends. I decided to use this technique to pay homage to alternative subcultures' roots. Here's me using the lighter technique. I later use it to burn some holes into more empty panels of the jacket as well. You may be wondering why I chose to do this project. Well, although the idea for something like this is not at all new, people in alternative subcultures have been doing it for literal decades, I always wanted to make one. It's been about 4 or 5 years that I wanted to make one, but I never did because it is quite an ambitious project. But I finally did, and I put my whole heart and soul into this project, and it's really just represents everything that I really love. I sewed on some studs and used the lighter trick with them as well. A lot of the things that I added to this jacket I'd been collecting for a while, like these crosses. I wanted to include my very first choker in this. I felt like it was too sentimental to get rid of, so I removed this strap here and sewed in the choker there. I measured, cut, and sewed on a piece of green leopard print fabric to put on the inside of the collar. It kind of makes it sort of funky. I like leopard print anyway, and obviously the color green. And a lot of people did this in the 80s as well. So again, pretty much everything I'm doing is paying homage to my favorite time. On the back, I painted some religious motifs and added some kilt pins for some extra detail. Also, all of the paint that I used was a mixture of acrylic, fabric, and color developer. Here I am ironing on the 2 iron-on patches that I had that obviously I did not make, and then just ironing the jacket as a whole so that it looks nice. I chose to do an upcycle not only because it's good for the environment, but it's also really fun to do. I really enjoy giving old clothes a new life and a new vibe overall. Another reason why I made this is because it makes me feel more connected to my subculture. This jacket was my love letter to the 80s, and it really makes me feel more part of the community when eventually I go out with my friends and I wear this jacket. This jacket, like I said before, it represents the things that I love, and I really wanted to make it anyway, even if it weren't for this class. Another reason why I decided to make this jacket is because a lot of the times they're very rugged and have sporadic stitching like I used. Oftentimes I struggle with perfectionism and wanting everything to be absolutely perfect, and these types of jackets completely defy perfectionism, and it kind of dares you to try and critique it because it's intentionally messy. So those were the reasons that I chose to do this. And drum roll, please. These are the results. And here's the back as well. I hope you love it as much as I do.